Callous and evil farmer sh0t his estranged wife, 51, to death in front of her teenage daughter die. Published 1822 BST, June 4, 2019. Updated 1859 BST, June 4, 2019. A callous and evil husband shot his estranged wife to death in front of her teenage daughter in a jealous rage, a court has heard. Andrew Hooper, 46, who now can't speak due to severe facial injuries, is accused of shooting 51-year-old Cheryl Hooper in the throat with an antique shotgun before turning it on himself. She had pulled up outside her home where she lived with her 14-year-old daughter in Newport, Shropshire, on January 26 last year when she was killed. Crown Court heard Hooper killed her after becoming consumed with anger and jealousy when he found out she was in a new relationship. Andrew Hooper, 46, who now can't speak due to severe facial injuries, is accused of shooting 51-year-old Cheryl Hooper pictured in the throat with an antique shotgun before turning it on himself. She had pulled up outside her home where she lived with her 14-year-old daughter in Newport, Shropshire, on January 26 last year when she was killed. Police and forensic Hooper, described as a controlling individual, had tracked his wife's car, spotted her with a man called Ian Priest, returned to his farm to collect a shotgun and ambushed her outside her house. The court heard he then drove home where he wrote a note for his son and shot himself but missed, causing himself devastating permanent injuries. Birmingham Crown Court heard Hooper killed her after becoming consumed with anger and jealousy when he found out she was in a new relationship. Cheryl left him after 18 months of marriage in 2017 because he was too controlling, the court heard. The prosecution said that when Hooper saw his wife with Mr. Priest, the straw had broken the camel's back. The court heard the alleged victim's 14-year-old daughter had seen Hooper look like a psychopath with murder in his eyes before killing her mother. The Crown described the alleged murder as a cold-blooded, ruthless, and callous execution. David Mason QC, prosecuting, told the jury Hooper was a cold-blooded murderer who was consumed with anger and jealousy. He said Cheryl Hooper died sitting in the front seat of her car, having just arrived at her rented home with her daughter. The 14-year-old daughter of Mrs. Hooper was heard screaming at the scene, "My mum's been shot, she's dead." Hooper, described as a controlling individual, had tracked his wife's car, spotted her with a man called Ian Priest, returned to his farm to collect a shotgun and ambushed her outside her house. Police blocked she had been out for a fun evening with some friends, but before she even had time to get out of the car, this defendant took a loaded shotgun and fired twice into her body at close range. It was a brutal and cowardly act, committed by a man that was clearly consumed with anger and jealousy. Describing the events leading up to the alleged murder, Mr. Mason said whatever he may have been saying to Cheryl publicly, privately his jealousy raged to an uncontrollable level. He tracked her car, without telling anyone. He obtained another. He waited until when he knew that she was going out. He followed her and, he added, this is a case that will leave you in no doubt that this man is a cold-blooded murderer and that when that weapon went off that night, not once, but twice, he had no intention other than murder. Officers arrived to find Mrs. Hooper in a black Range Rover Evoque pictured with a gunshot wound to her neck. Describing the events leading up to the alleged murder, Mr. Mason said whatever he may have been saying to Cheryl publicly, privately his jealousy raged to an uncontrollable level. Flowers have been. Hooper owned 6 shotguns and had threatened to kill himself on a number of occasions. Mr. Mason said his long-standing friend, Anthony Steele, first removed his 6 shotguns on January 1 last year after he had threatened to kill himself. He added that Hooper later took back the shotguns and was then found with the barrel of one of them under his chin. Mr. Mason said Hooper also threatened to kill himself once when Cheryl was still living on his farm. He said Cheryl put her arms around him and said to him that if he was going to shoot himself, he would have to shoot her as well. The black Range Rover was covered by a forensics tent to preserve the scene against the weather as officers continue to investigate the murder. She had said it apparently to try and calm him down. Little was she to know. The court heard that on a previous occasion Hooper flew into a rage at their home and hurled a television set across the room. Mr. Mason said Cheryl eventually left her husband and sought solace in a new relationship with Mr. Priest. He said some might say that you couldn't blame her for trying to have a little fun after years of unhappiness. The friendship with Mr. Priest, however, is almost certainly what tipped the defendant over the edge on the January 26th. He had already put a tracker onto Cheryl's vehicle without telling her and knew where she was that evening when she went out to a pub in Tettenhall. On the January 26th, Cheryl had made an arrangement to meet a friend of hers, Caroline Tranter, to go to the pub and meet others there, including Ian Priest. It was time to have a bit of fun and enjoy herself. While she was at the pub, police carried out a fingertip search at the scene of the incident in Farmers Gate. At that stage, after the initial shock, it dawned on Cheryl that he must have tracked her to the pub, as he could not have known she was there. Mr. Hooper realized that Cheryl was with Mr. Priest, a man that he, the defendant, realized liked her, and there was clearly a row of some sort outside between Cheryl and her husband. He then left and returned to his farm. At the pub, an indication of the sort of angry and aggressive mood that was raging within him. There is CCTV footage of a lot of the activity at both the pub and back at the defendant's farm. In particular, after he had been to the pub and found Cheryl, he returned to the farm and was seen carrying an item from his house to the Land Rover. It had a shape and where it had come from is unclear, as it was not one of the shotguns that had been removed from him days earlier. Mr. Mason noted that Ms. Hooper's daughter said the defendant had murder in his eyes. But within 20 minutes or so of finding Cheryl at the pub with Mr. Priest, he is back home putting a shotgun into his vehicle. The straw had broken the camel's back. He had his evidence, he had clearly spoiled the evening, and after a while Cheryl left and took Caroline home. She didn't drink, en route the defendant rang Cheryl and she put the phone onto loudspeaker. As a result, he said that he was going to divorce her and burn the rest of her belongings at the farm. He also said that, having picked up her daughter, Cheryl then drove back to her rented house. As she pulled up he then calmly walked over to the driver's side of the vehicle. Her daughter, he had murder in his eyes, was the way that she explained it in her interview with the police. She heard him smashing the glass with what she thought at first was a shovel. Her mother was screaming. She then saw him pointing the gun. She knows about guns. She said that when she realized that he had a gun, he waited a few seconds to make her mother realize, "I've got a gun and I am going to shoot you, I am going to kill you." She thought that he waited long enough for her to think, "I am gonna die." A very chilling op. She then described him shooting Cheryl and then storming off. The second shot was to Cheryl's neck region and caused fatal bleeding. She would have died. There was nothing that the emergency services, including a trauma doctor, could have done, and Cheryl was pronounced dead at the scene at midnight. The court heard that police were only able to interview Hooper in hospital on November 29 last year, and because he cannot speak, had to tap his answers out on a keyboard. Mr. Mason said he said that somehow the gun went off as he was knocking the glass of the driver's door window. And that's what broke. He accepted that both barrels went off. He maintained that he had no intention to fire the gun. He just intended. The jury heard Hooper's suicide note he left for his son. "Read, I am sorry you have to read this. But I have found Cheryl has been cheating on me and the whole family. I have done what I have done because I truly did love her, but she has destroyed everything we had. Please forgive me for my actions, because I wish you to have a happy life. I am so proud of you and the man you have become. The trial continues.
Raindrop, drip, drop top smoking, no cooking the hot pot. Fucking on your bitch, yeah, that. Looking up, open the park pot.